Hi there, guys. Good afternoon. Welcome to My Compound Life. I'm your host, Jonathan. This is a channel where we build assets, we build habits, and of course, we build freedom. That should really be financial freedom, time freedom for you, me, and anyone else that watches my video. Okay, so today, what we want to talk about is the MSTR, MSCI rule change. Would that be a good news, bad news, and what does it mean for Bitcoin? Okay, so we're gonna specifically talk. Uh, you know, ever since I kind of know about this a few days ago, I've also actually reported this in our Bitcoin daily video. Um, I think there's so many moving parts. I think it deserves another video by itself, right? So that's why I'm like making this video. So if you're a Bitcoin holder, and especially if you also hold MicroStrategy MSTR, the ticker MSTR, you've got to watch till the end of this video, right? So just treat this video as a MSTR MSCI update, right? So honestly, it's a good news and not so good news at the same time for this. I'm going to explain it like with five, right? No jargon because a lot of time, every time when I look through MicroStrategy, there's a lot of different jargon that confuses me. So I'm trying to make this as simple to understand as possible because most of the people get confused with index rules, share counts, ATM dilutions, all that stuff. So at the end, what I aim to do on this video is I'll answer some of the key questions that I'm personally interested, and I'm sure you guys are interested too. So if you already hold MSTR ticker, if you hold MicroStrategy, is this good for HODL? Or if you're new, is this a good time to buy MSTR or Bitcoin? And what does the signal for Bitcoin uh, going forward? So, quick disclaimer, this is not financial advice, just education, me doing some research and very keen to share with all of you, right? So, first off, what is MSCI and why do we care? MSCI is basically one of the biggest rule makers for stock indexes. And that really matters because indexes are, just think of it like shopping baskets. Example, an index might hold the biggest companies in the US or the biggest global companies on a specific sector. So that's why it matters. So a lot of money is passive money. That means index funds, ETF that tracks an index must buy what's in the basket and must sell what's removed. So if a company gets kicked out of the big index, it can trigger a lot of forced selling, right? So because people hate the company, but it's not because people hate the company, but because the rule says we need to sell, right? That's the key. So the big fear when will MSCI kick out MSTR because it holds too much Bitcoin, right? So MSCI had been reviewing something called digital asset treasury companies. So basically companies where digital asset like Bitcoin are a huge part of the balance sheet. So MSCI concern was some of these companies, they kind of behave more like an investment fund rather than an operating company, right? And we know strategy, it's kind of in a hybrid company where they have a small portion of the business. It does modeling and analytics. And of course, a huge portion of the business is actually investment fund for Bitcoin, right? So, and if MSCI decided they're more like a fund, then under index rules, they could be excluded. So for MSTR, that would be nasty. Why? I can hear you ask, because index fund could be forced to sell MSTR shares, right? And you don't want that. I don't want that. And any of the Bitcoin holders, I'm sure you guys don't want that, because MSTR stock price could drop hard. And if MSTR stock price drop hard, their ability to raise money to buy more Bitcoin becomes harder. So that was the overhang. And the good news of this MSCI and MSTR news, right? So MSCI will not exclude these Bitcoin treasury companies for now, right? For now. Okay, so on January the 6th, I've covered this on our Bitcoin Daily video. So hit the like, hit subscribe, and become my 96th to 100th subscribers. Okay, so on the January the 6th, 2026, MSCI published their consultation result and said they are not implementing the proposal to exclude these companies from MSCI indexes as part of the February 2026 index review. So what does this mean in simple English? We're not kicking MSTR out right now or right immediately. That's why on social media people call it removing tail risk for MSTR, because it removes that big scary downside scenario of forced selling happening. Okay, so MSCI also said they'll do a broader review later about how to treat non-operating companies in general, because this issue is bigger than just Bitcoin. So not a forever victory for MicroStrategy, right? But it's a major short-term win for sure, right? So not so short-term selling pressure, that's off. Your Bitcoin will not drop all of a sudden because of such news. Okay, I think that's what you care about, right? Whether your Bitcoin will pump or not. Okay, so the not so good news now, MSCI changed how it treats new shares for these companies. This is part of most people miss. Okay, so MSCI also said they will not implement increases to the number of shares and some other index factors for these securities. So in plain English, it means if MSTR issue new shares, we are not going to update the index share count to reflect it. And why does that matter, right? Because MSTR has a strategy where they issue shares through an ATM, that stands for at the market offering, not ATM machine, okay? Use the cash to buy more Bitcoin. So now, under the old world, when a company issue more shares and the index updates its official share counts, passive index funds might need to buy additional shares over this to stay aligned, right? That can create a steady background bid, constant automatically buy, constant demand going in the background. But under the new MSCI handling for these Bitcoin treasury companies, those extra shares don't automatically translate into extra index buying, not anymore. So MSTR shares issuance has to be absorbed mostly by regular buyers in the open market. That will be us, because we're the retail, we buy MSTR, right? And regular buyers are more price sensitive. That's us, right? They might say, I'll buy, but only at a discount. So the fundraising for MicroStrategy become less efficient, for sure. So net, this is why the market reaction looks, it's kind of good, it's kind of bad. This is the clean way to summarize it. So major downside risk has now been removed, right? No near-term forced selling from index removal. So no no sudden sell-off for MicroStrategy share, where strategy or MicroStrategy would have to sell off their Bitcoin to cover this. But at the same time, the major upside mechanics got weakened for strategy. So less automatic index buying when new shares are issued. Okay, so this news is stabilizing, but not a rocket fuel announcement. So this is what you guys need to follow, right? That also helped explain why Bitcoin didn't suddenly, pump, gone to the moon off this headline alone, right? Because yesterday I was like, you know what, Bitcoin gone to about 94,000. Maybe, with such news, it can get back to 100K. But there's a whole new deeper meaning on this. So the key part, did this rule change explain MSTR heavy ATM dilution before this decision? My view, yes, it's very likely. So think about incentives, right? If you believe MSCI might change rules and reduce future index support for new shares, then you would want to raise as much capital as possible before the rule change fully bites, right? So that means buy as much Bitcoin as possible while your flywheel is working best. So that's something that Saylor definitely did. So I'm sure he knew about all of this and made that strategic decision to dilute all of our MSTR, right? So that he can acquire as much Bitcoin as possible for the past couple of months. So the heavy ATM activity in late 2025 totally fits this logic, guys, right? So if you are Michael Saylor, I am sure all of you would be doing it. So I can't prove the intent for sure. Only Saylor and his team knows, but the timing and the incentives, it really does line up, right? Okay, the better news angle, this could reduce crazy ATM dilution going forward. So if you hold MSTR, of course, I think, sometime, I mean, I kind of felt quite beaten up when MSTR reduced tremendously. Recently, I think it was, it dropped well over 50% from its all-time high. Yeah, so I think generally, I think it's good. If MSCI isn't going to reward new share issuance with index shares, share count increases for these names, then the market may punish dilution more. So this can force MSTR to be more disciplined. That's good. So for long-term shareholders, less constant dilution can be positive. It can push MSTR to use other instruments like preferred or other structured financing. And MSCI specifically said it won't implement those share counts increases, and it will also defer additions of size migration for the names on that preliminary list. So the message is, yes, you can stay in the index, but we're not going to keep adjusting things upward like before. So what does it mean for me or you as MSTR holder? If you already hold MSTR, this is good news for HODL, right? Overall, it's supportive because your worst nightmare, short terms, was MSCI kicked them out, passive funds down, chaos, and then your MSTR will lose even more value. And the fact that you hold MSTR as well as Bitcoin, your Bitcoin will dump too. Imagine that double whammy, right? So that risk is now reduced near term. But you still need to understand what you own. MSTR is basically a leveraged Bitcoin proxy with a corporate wrapper and capital market strategy. So your main driver remains Bitcoin price direction, MSTR premium versus its Bitcoin holding, uh, and how aggressively they dilute to raise the capital, right? So this MSCI update helps remove one big cliff risk, but it doesn't remove the normal risk, okay? So if you're new to MSTR, is this a good time to buy? Okay, here's a tough one, right? If you want pure Bitcoin exposure, trust me, spot Bitcoin is the cleanest, right? Just stick with buying Bitcoin, right? Stick with buying spot Bitcoin and nothing else. No corporate structure risk, no dilution risk, no premium discount, that kind of games. If you buy MSTR, you are making extra bets, right? Extra bets meaning Bitcoin goes up, obviously, MSTR goes up. MSTR can keep financing efficiently. The market continues to award MSTR a premium for its strategy. And of course, management executes without destroying shareholders through over dilution. So for a new buyer, I would say MSTR, it's not exactly safe. It's kind of like a high beta Bitcoin. So I would suggest to stick with just spot Bitcoin if you want peace of mind, I guess. So what does this indicate for Bitcoin future, right? Because if you don't hold MSTR, very likely you watches my channel, you obviously hold some Bitcoin, right? So this is the bigger picture I want you to notice. MSCI is even having their debate because Bitcoin is now large enough that public companies holding huge Bitcoin treasuries are affecting mainstream equity indexes. So institutions care about classification, volatility, accounting, and whether this starts looking like a fund, right? So I think this is all bullish in the long term. It means Bitcoin isn't a joke anymore. A lot of people leave me comment recently about Bitcoin being a Ponzi. So it's now big enough to cause index methodology discussion at the highest level, like MSCI. What's MSCI doing right now? But it's also showing institution wants guardrail on Bitcoin, and we all know that there can never be more guardrail, right? So this is why whenever institutions are trying to place more guardrail, it's better off just holding Bitcoin, guys. So near term, you can get headlines that sound scary, but long term, I think this is just part of institutions adoption, Bitcoin becoming a lot more matured, fully, financialized, and really plug into the old traditional system. So my take to all of this, right? If I boil it down, the MSCI update is good for reducing a big downside risk for us, the MSTR holders, but it also reduces a nice upside tailwind that came from passive index flow supporting shares issuance. And this kind of explains why MSTR went heavy on ATM issuance before, So and for us that are into Bitcoin, that are into MicroStrategy, I think for at least for Bitcoins, it's a sign of maturity, but also a reminder that the system will try to define and control the wrappers around Bitcoin, even if they can't control Bitcoin itself. So stick with Bitcoin. I mean, if you have to build a bag of MSTR, find ways to also build a bag for Bitcoin too. I think that would in spot Bitcoin in spot. I think that would be the best way to mitigate all of this risk moving forward. Okay, so if you like the content, hit like, hit subscribe. I think this is a very important thing that many of you guys need to know the behind story of the MSCI and MSTR. Hope you like the content. Let me know who you are if you're new subscribers, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye bye. Bye.